Shut up and sit down.
Howdy guys, it's Andy from Big Meg's Workshop and Painting Studio, and today it's a big guy. I've never painted anything quite to this scale. This is Skarbrand the Bloodthirster. As you can see, I started off with a black base, and I am starting the base tone colour with German Red Brown, which is a Vallejo Prime paint. Now, as you can see, it's quite a nice rich red. Now we're getting straight into this bad boy. It was a lot of fun to paint, but quite intimidating because there's so much detail on this guy. And as you can see, I'm using a lot of airbrush work on this one. Once we've got that, got a decent coat of the red, I'm starting to put some decay black from scale 75 into the extremities. I wanted sort of a black to red fade, just to make it look a little bit different. And as you can see, I'm just building it up all the way along his feet and hands, and also along the wings as well. So once we've got this nice black to red section going, we're starting to bring up the red a bit now in a nice deep colour, using deep red, which is a scale 75 red. As you can see, it's quite vibrant over the top of this German Red Brown. I'm using it on the highlight areas, but I'm also spreading it across into some of the lower areas as well. So next up is Aldebaran Red, again another scale 75. I'm starting to pick out the raised areas of the muscle tone. Now this is quite orangey, so I'm being quite careful with this at this point now. And what I'm trying to do is just sort of accentuate the muscle tone, really sort of bring out the shape of the model all across the torso and across the wings, bringing out that real vibrant colour. So now I'm going back in with the German Red Brown, but I'm coming in from 45 degrees below, just to start bringing the base tones back together. So you get an interesting transition, and what that's going to do is just start to add some shade to it. And now back across from the top, it's Mars Orange, which is similar to Troll Slayer by GW. I'm using that to bring up the upper sections of the muscles again, really vibrant. So I want him to look like he's got a lot of muscle definition. As you can see, I'm just starting to bring that muscle tone texture right up, and getting those high spots real vibrant. So now I'm going to do a little bit of work on his armour plating. He's got really intricate armour plating here, so I'm using the airbrush again. And this is scale 75 decayed metal, something similar to water bronze. I'm also painting the inside of it. I didn't know exactly how well it'd cover, so just getting a good coverage across all the metal work. So once I've got that done, it's now a purple and red tone awash. I'm starting to paint this into the models, but I changed tack in a little while, as painting it in wasn't giving me the definition I really wanted. But it's purple and red tone, brought up into the muscle texture to add a little bit more depth, which you don't get with the airbrush. Back onto highlighting, starting to bring up those hot spots now, using a brush, using a really thin down Mars Orange. Now it's important you keep this super thin as you're building the layer up with a sort of a glaze technique. You don't want the highlights to be too obvious, otherwise it'll just look really sloppy. And just taking a little bit of time on this guy. As you can see, I'm just starting to bring out the muscle texture as well. There's a lot of detail on this, and there's a lot of texture work. So I'm using the same method as I did on the bone sections of the wings, just with a thin down paint, just bringing up that muscle definition with real thin paint. Now as you can see, I'm just bringing it up a little bit more with that same colour, because as it's so thin, you can use the same colour to highlight the colours underneath, which will act like a filter. so you're getting extra detail come up from using the same colour on the highlights of the older colours. So I'm really bringing up those muscle textures and just making it look a bit more interesting. So back onto the airbrush, and I'm bringing that purple and red tone wash. It's really thinned down, and what I'm doing is I'm washing the firing the wash through the airbrush and coming in from underneath, just like I did with the base layer again. And it's just starting to add some real depth onto the model. Now, because it's so thin, because it's even though it's the wash paint, I've thinned it down again, and allows me to get a lot of control onto the depth of the model. So certain areas I'll be putting more in, certain areas will be a lot less. So just like on this torso section here, I'm doing exactly the same thing, just adding more definition to it through using that wash. So it brings down some of the excessive highlights, and you really get a cool finish on a cool effect from it. So now onto some of the bone work. So start off with walnut, which is sort of a talon sand maybe sort of colour, something along that sort of area. You get a real good coat on this, a couple of layers, and you get a real nice finish. It just takes a little bit of effort, but with the horns having such well defined ridges in it, it really does take the paint well. And I'm also working onto the leather work, which is used black leather, which is scale 75. Now you could use dryad bark for this with similar sort of colour pattern. The black leather just gives you that sort of a red, purpley colour to it, which makes for a real nice base. So all the base coats are in now. I'm just starting to put some more black leather onto the weapons, exactly using the exact same method as I have done on the belts and the wrist straps. So back on some more highlighting on the skin work, again using the Mars Orange. I've just added a little bit of yellow into it now, just to bring it up a little bit more. And what I'm doing is exactly the same as it was, just being a little bit more careful, keeping the extra lines a little bit thinner, and the paint really watered down. So now I'm adding another wash with the airbrush. It's the same one, it's the same red and purple. I used the red and purple rather than just a straight purple, just so I wanted to take away some of the blueness of the colour. But I'm doing exactly the same thing and bringing that depth into the muscle texture without taking too much away from the highlights. So as you can see, he's got a load of veins poking out through his arms and his muscles, and that is based with Dark Reaper by GW. As you can see, I'm using a really fine brush at this point because I don't want to make it too messy, as that could ruin the entire thing. And so again, thin paint, but I want a good coat on this, so it's going to take a couple of layers to build it up. And what you're going to get is this kind of a bluey grey vein just poking through the skin tone. And once I've got that bluey greyness sorted out, I'm now glazing Harvester Flesh by Scale 75 over the top, which is quite of an orangey skin colour. I'm using that just to take away some of that blueness and blend it into the muscles, so it looks like it's the veins showing through the skin rather than just being sat on the top. It just brings it all together a little bit more, making the thing look a little bit more alive. So now onto his teeth, and I am using Iroko by Scale 75. This is quite a yellowy bone colour, something along the lines of Karak stone, up Shabty Bone, that sort of area. Really good colour for teeth. It also adds a little bit of yellowness to the inner edges of the teeth as well, so you get sort of a staining on it as you start to highlight the teeth up. So once the Iroko has gone down, I'm just going to bring it up a little bit more with some birch, which is equally changed up with Screaming Skull. And I'm just glazing that highlight in, trying not to take too much of the yellowiness away, as that just ruined the effect what I was going for. So onto the armour plating now. I'm getting old copper. Old copper's sort of the same sort of colour as Hashut copper. I'm painting that on the inner sections of the armour plating. This takes a long time because there's a hell of a lot of detail on this guy. As you can see, the armour plates have got loads of small inner sections and outer sections. So I'm just painting the inner sections up with the old copper. So you've got two different colours of the metal on top of it. So you don't get too much of a single colour in there. So, old copper's gone down, and next it is Victorian Brass, which is slightly lighter than the old copper. It's like mixing a little bit of gold into it. Maybe again as gold, that could work for it, for that replacement. And again, I'm just starting to build up the colours on the layers of the highlights, starting to just focus towards the upper sections, still taking it down into the sort of the lower areas a little bit, as you want the transitions to be fairly smooth. The last thing you want is big ridges of colour change. After the Victorian Brass, it is Amber Alchemy. This is probably something along the lines of Sycorax Bronze, that sort of area. And as you can see, I'm just starting to use it on the upper sections now. This is really thinned down, so I can stretch the paint a little bit and allow it to blend in with some of the deeper colours as well. So the last one is Moonstone Alchemy, which doesn't really have a mix. Again, probably the nearest thing would be Sycorax, maybe with a little bit of silver in there. It's really pale, so I'm just using it as a final pinpoint highlight, just really bringing the shape of the model together. You get a really cool look with the with this particular color pattern. So the silver work, really done simply, is GW's lead belcher. It's got a load of chains and sort of handcuff type, manacle type looking things knocking around on it on his wings, and that's all done with a base coat of lead belcher. Now, as always, just thin your paint down, make sure you take your time, as it's such a cool fig, you don't want to ruin it. Once the lead belcher's dried, Nuln Oil, you can't go wrong with that stuff. It's just great for any kind of metal work. It really picks out the detail well. And as you can see, I'm just starting to put the Nuln Oil onto the chains as well. Now, as always, I thin this down so you'll get a couple of layers of that. Next is Vallejo's gunmetal. There's plenty of other lighter silvers out there which you easily use instead. And I'm just starting to build them highlights up over the top of the Nuln Oil. Also, it's an opportunity for me to fix any places where I've missed, as it's still only the second layer. After the chainmail is Chrome by Vallejo. It's part of the Vallejo Air range, and as it's so thin, you don't need to thin it down too much if you're just painting it in. And I'm just finishing off these highlights, making them nice and vibrant. Now, at this point, I was really starting to get frustrated, as with it being largely airbrushed, I'd I was finding I was rubbing the paint off a lot. Anyway, back onto the paint list. This is again back onto the paint list. This is another layer of chrome just going over the top, just to make sure that those highlights will really stand out. So the last thing you want is the highlights just to not be right. And I'm just adding an extra layer of non-oiling, again thin down as always, just to pick up that depth again. So the last thing you want is the depth to not look as interesting and striking as it should. So yeah, as I was saying, I was getting a bit frustrated at this point as the paint was being rubbed off by my hands, but these are unavoidable. I really should have put a layer of varnish on at this point. So highlighting the horns now. This is sandalwood. Can't really think of a comparison. It's a nice deep bone colour. Really brings up the highlights nicely. There's a nice first layer over the walnut, and just pulling that, bringing the highlights up, making sure that I don't go too deep into the recesses. So the last thing I want to do is fill up them with too much of a brighter colour. So I've added some Iroko into it, just to start brightening it up now. And as you can see, I'm just pulling those highlights in. Still starting right at the top, but I'm focusing the paint towards the leading edges. I want the leading edges to be the brightest. So I'm just pulling that paint together, and as you can see, I'm just feathering it in, making those transitions the best I can. After the Iroko, I've put a thin down wash of Agrax just to bring out that depth again. It's a nature of this sort of thing. You do sort of pull paint into the recesses where you don't want them to be. So it's always good for them just to add a thin down wash into the recesses, just to get that depth back where it needs to be. And then I am using the sandalwood and Iroko mix, but I've added some birch into it. And birch is not dissimilar to Screaming Skull. It's a nice, vibrant, sort of bony white colour. I'm just starting to bring out that detail, trying to be as neat as possible, as I don't want to have to go through the pain of adding the extra washing again where I don't need it. So once that layer's gone down, it's just pretty much pure birch at this point. I'm just using a very thin brush just to really get them pinpoint highlights as best I can. As you can see, I've left some of the joins visible on this kit. I'm not the best with milliput, and there's so much detail I didn't want to ruin it by putting a hatchet job of filling into it. So I just thought I'd best off leave it as it was. So now I'm using Vallejo's Ivory just to finalise those highlights. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I use Ivory quite a lot for my vibrant white colours. It's a lot better to use than whites and a pure white because it's less chalky. There's a little bit of yellow and a little bit of colour into it. So I decided I wanted the other bone sections to be a slightly different shade, otherwise it'll be really dull and get too much of the same colour. So I've gone over the top of the walnut with Talon Sand by GW. As you can see, I'm starting to find some of the areas where I've rubbed the paint off, and thankfully I've muted my video sound, as I would be swearing quite a lot here. So getting that Talon Sand nice and smooth, and I'm adding some Shabty bone to it now, just bringing an extra colour in, making that blend up nice and bright. So I'm getting very much a sort of a tooth colour rather than a flat sort of muted bone. I'm adding some more shabby bone to it now. I'm starting to bring the colour out of it. So what you're getting now is slightly blended look to the extremities and the leading edges of the bone. I'm trying to keep the bright sections upward on the upper side of the bone sections. I don't know what these bits would be called, as they will be mostly in the light. So I'm adding some Screaming Skull into it now, and just starting to make those leading edges a little bit more intimidating, a bit brighter, make them look a bit more interesting as well. So after that, I had a look through the washes. It turned out I found a burnt umber wash, which is something I never realised we'd had. We've had it for years without noticing. I was very intrigued with this, so I give it a thin down wash of burnt umber across all of the bone, this sort of bone area, and it's actually really nice. Never seen this one, I've never used it, and it's a very, very good colour for this sort of shaded bone. As always, thinned it down so I could apply 2 or 3 layers on it if I needed to. So back onto the once I've got the wash to dry, back onto it with the highlight colour again, the Screaming Skull. I'm just starting to bring out those highlights over the shaded areas and really start to pick it up, neaten it up a bit as well, and you get a nice effect over the top. And there you go, we've got a very vibrant looking bone protrusion coming out of that wing. If anybody knows what them sections are called, please let me know in the messages, in the comments, as I am definitely interested into finding out what they are actually called. I'm now using a bit of a Talon sand to add a bit more yellow, and this is really thinned down so it stretches nicely. You can really move that paint around, so you can actually blend it in with some of the lighter colours. As you can see, I've just added a little touch of it into the middle around where the damage is, and it just adds a bit more life to that bone. So long as you keep your paint thin, you can pretty much move the paint around a hell of a lot, adding and taking away the colour. So onto his hair, and that is Dark Reaper. So it's Dark Reaper. There's a little bit of black in there at a minute, but it didn't come out bright enough, so I do go back over it with Dark Reaper again. There we are, we're going with the Dark Reaper. I've added more Dark Reaper into that black just to start bringing out some actual colour to it. And what we're getting is a very, very striking colour. A bit more like the original colour I was going to go with, because the original idea was he's going to be a big blue demon. But I was talking to Dodge, and we figured more of a classic demon would be more beneficial for you guys, and probably a bit more interesting to look at as well. So this is basically Dark Reaper at this point, and I'm adding more and more to the highlights of the hair, bringing it up, making that start to stand out against the red. And you have that nice contrast from the red to the blue. So now I've just added a little bit of a lighter colour in there into the Dark Reaper, just to start adding some highlights. Make the hair stand out as much as possible, but still keeping it fairly dark, because it is a big scary demon. You don't want to be too colourful, that'd look a bit weird. So bringing it all together with a non-oil wash, and once all the highlights on the once all the hair has been washed down, once it's dried, it all brings it all together, back together with that black base. So onto the leather. So I've added some brown leather into the black leather. This is a lot of small steps to bring this together. So the brown leather just adds a little bit more life to it, makes it a little bit brighter, and you start getting really cool transitions. And this is almost a full coat. I'm focusing towards the outside areas, but it's still almost going all over. Now I've added some orange leather now. As you can see, it really did change the colour there, and this is going to be focused towards the areas where it's going to be getting the most worn. So once the orange leather, I've added again a little bit of a Rocco into the mixture, just to lighten it up again. I'm starting to focus on those higher areas where the leather will be in contact with the skin the most. And you can see how the leather work, the texture appears to change as you start to add these extra colours in there. So a little bit more Iroko now, and you can see I'm just focusing towards the edges and just starting to make the edges start to be more pronounced, so the depth is kept inside the inside the intersections. Now I do apologise for this image, it's really difficult to get this model to stay on camera properly, as he's such a big bruiser. So finally, it is a touch of birch, and they're on the extreme edges now. And if you wanted to go as far, you can always add some little flaws into the mix as well, onto the armour where it's been worn. And what you do then, you just add some, as well as the highlights, you add some little extra dots and lines onto the areas, and then you just paint in the original colour, black leather, to shade it down, and what you get is a real nice effect. So onto the outer layers of the armour plating. And I've done this across all the armour as well. It's Retributor to get a nice rich gold colour. Retributor armour, and I'm being really careful now because obviously I've done a lot of work on the intersections, so you get a real vibrant yellow. So now I've added some steel to it, which is a Vallejo air colour, just to brighten it up, and you get a nice highlight for it as well. And I'm just starting to bring that together. Obviously focusing mostly on the higher areas, but I do bring some of the light colour down as well, so you get a consistent colour. After that is plus even more steel. So about 60% steel at this point. I'm just starting to touch the edges with the steel. Now at this point I thought it was a little bit too yellowy, a bit cartoony. So once I'd let all that dry, I just went over the top with a violet wash through the airbrush to bring it all down together, and it becomes a much richer colour, much more befitting a Greater Demon. So there you are, that is Skarbrand. Obviously you've been listening to me waffle on for the last 25 minutes or so. A lot of fun to paint, quite intimidating as well. There's a hell of a lot of stuff going on with this guy. I'd never painted anything quite to this scale before. Obviously I've done vehicles and that, but they're large flat panels, so it's not quite the same. But yeah, this guy was a lot of work to do. It took a fair while to do it, As you can see, I've thrown some blood effects on him. He's a bloodthirster at least, so he needs something. And there you go, looking at his torso as well. You can see how much of a difference it made to the cartoony richness. So thank you for watching me paint this guy and listen to me ramble on. Obviously got some thank yous to make, as always. So huge thank yous to our Patreons. You guys are awesome, and without you, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you to the York Boys, Ludwig, Warren, D-Wack, Kit Lindquist, Acmus of Dawn, Mark, and Matt. You guys are awesome. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this at all. So thank you very much. Also, like to put you in the direction of the links below. Our huge thank yous to the Outpost, which are our affiliate link. If you want to get reduced price models, they're a great third-party store. If you use our affiliate link, we get store credit as well. So every little bit helps. Also, we do have some merchandise, which we hope to be improving over the next few weeks. So just check us out on Teesprings and see if there's anything on there you like. Obviously, if you want to see more of this sort of stuff, please hit like, hit subscribe, and share with your friends. And we shall catch you in the next one, guys. So see you later. Bye-bye.